If there have been all of these warnings from the FBI to Congress, from the intelligence agencies to the White House, there have been public warnings to the U.S. public about there being a Russian intelligence operation of this kind, targeting this election in this way. And by the way, here's the names of the cast of characters involved. And Mr. Giuliani is still willingly and wittingly serving as their conduit of this information in order to carry out this interference effort. Shouldn't that be illegal? Shouldn't he potentially be in trouble for that, regardless of whether or not the president is also promoting it and regardless of whatever effect it has on the election?
At a minimum, Rachel, it's conspiracy to engage in computer crimes and hacking in violation of criminal laws. It's also potentially conspiracy to engage in an election interference. But I think the most important point is that Rudy Giuliani wasn't just merely fed this intelligence. He wasn't just passively receiving it. He ordered it off the menu. He demanded it. He banged his hand on the table and said, give me that dirt on Joe Biden. That's the reason, Rachel, why the president of the United States called the Ukrainian president last July. Spoiler alert, he got impeached for this and demanded dirt against Joe Biden. And he said, I'm sending Rudy Giuliani to Kiev to collect it. Lo and behold, here we've seen it.
We've seen some testimonial sort of video diaries from some healthcare workers at Bellin. We've seen a lot of reporting about how resources at the hospital have been stretched to accommodate this influx of patients. What do you think the country should know right now about how things are going in Wisconsin and how you all are coping with what has been a really steep rise in cases?
So we are currently experiencing an amazing rise in coronavirus cases over the past month. We didn't really have a second wave. We're in the middle of our second wave right now. And on Friday, we had 3,800 new COVID cases in the state of Wisconsin. We know that 6% of COVID patients will ultimately need to be admitted. So that means in 7 to 10 to 14 days, we're going to have 228 patients from a single day who are going to need hospitalization in a state where our bed capacity is already close to being maxed out. I've been a doctor for 34 years, and I have never seen the amount of suffering I've seen in a short period of time. I've never seen in my career a time where an entire ward, 20, 30, 40 beds, is filled up with patients with the same disease. People try to compare COVID-19 with influenza. We admit more patients per day for COVID-19 pneumonia than typically we admit in a whole influenza season. This is not at all like influenza.
I mean, right now, Biden is ahead in the polls, both nationally and in most swing states. Take the polls with a grain of salt, but it's true. If Biden is this far ahead, as the polls say, Biden doesn't need another debate right now to try to change the course of the campaign, right? He doesn't need to change his message dramatically to change the course of the campaign. From the Biden campaign's perspective right now, things are going well enough for them that they're happier the more people vote right now because they don't want anything to change over the next 15 days. In terms of whether or not there's going to be a third debate, well, President Trump backed out of the second debate. There's only been one debate so far, and it was that first one. President Trump's performance in that first debate was so disastrous, and his polling cratered so immediately thereafter. I'm sure the Biden campaign wouldn't mind a second sip of that tea, but it's a reasonable question, I think, as to whether or not there is going to be a third debate this week. I'm sure the Biden campaign is confident about their candidate's performance, given how President Trump behaved in debate one. But they really don't need things to change much over the next 15 days for things to go their way. The president did have that terrible first debate. He bailed on the second debate last week. I think it also shouldn't be overlooked that last week the president also admitted that he may have broken the rules that he agreed to, which stipulated that he needed to have a COVID test on the day of the first debate. The president was in the hospital, hospitalized for what appeared to be pretty significant COVID symptoms within days of the first debate. The president now won't say whether or not he actually followed the rules and got tested the day of that debate. He says maybe he did have that test, maybe he didn't, he doesn't know. Him breaking the rules in that first debate in that way should presumably have some sort of consequence, right? And if Biden wanted to opt out of debate 3, that seems like reason enough. Today, President Trump's campaign wrote an open letter complaining to the Commission on Presidential Debates about the rules his campaign already agreed to. They also, weirdly, in this letter to the commission, they complained that this final debate, they were promised, they said, they were promised that this final debate that's supposed to be coming up this week would be all about foreign policy and nothing else. And so now they want all of the other announced topics dropped. That's not true. The third debate was never promised to them or to anyone to be all about foreign policy. That is something the Trump campaign made up. The commission said from the outset that the moderator of the third and final debate would choose the topics herself and announce them in advance. That's what has happened. But the Trump campaign is lying about that, saying they were promised it would be all foreign policy. They're complaining about that now, hoping nobody remembers the real story. It seems a little desperate. The president today, of course, also started talking smack, started making personal attacks against Kristen Welker, the widely respected NBC News White House correspondent who is set to be the moderator of Thursday's debate. Of course he did. That kind of whining and complaining in advance and lying in advance about both the debate commission and the moderator, that's like, standard issue Trump campaign tactics, working the refs ahead of the contest. But now with the late-breaking news tonight about what's supposed to happen with the third and final debate this week, let's see what happens. The New York Times was first to report tonight that the Commission on Presidential Debates actually is going to change the debate format a little bit to try to keep it from turning into another 10,000-car pileup like the president careened us all into at the first debate. This is how the Times reported it earlier tonight. Quote, as in the first debate, each candidate will be allotted 2 minutes of speaking time to initially answer the moderator's questions. But while each candidate is using that allotted 2 minutes, quote, his opponent's microphone would be turned off during that period in an attempt to ensure an uninterrupted response. After the disastrous first debate, the commission had said they would consider additional measures to keep the debate functioning within the rules agreed to by the campaigns, including the rule that each candidate gets 2 minutes to answer before being interrupted. That means they warned this is coming, but now they actually made the change. Right? The Biden campaign has no need for this debate. The Trump campaign needs the debate, but they're so invested in the public narrative that the president is the victim and he needs everything to go his own way that, of course, this is a perfect excuse for them to quit the debate, too.
Hi, my name is Melissa Resch. I am a nurse at Aspirus Wassa Hospital, and I work on the COVID medical unit. It has been quite an experience. We started off small scale, seeing patients who are being ruled out for COVID, and now we're seeing they were walking, talking, independent. Now we're seeing people high amounts of oxygen, needing to be repositioned, needing to be intubated, needing to be on large amounts of oxygen. N95 masks do not absorb tears when you are at a bedside, removing somebody from a BiPAP, letting their family FaceTime them to say goodbye, and you sit with them as they take their last breath. It is not something that I ever thought that I would be doing as a nurse during a pandemic, and we're seeing it more and more frequently.
My name is David Eggman. I'm a nurse. I've been a registered nurse for 20 years. I've worked in ICUs for 20 years. Since April, I've been volunteering in the COVID ICU. We had it pretty darn easy in April, May, June, and July here in Wisconsin, north central Wisconsin. Since August, it's gotten bad. And it's getting much worse. We have many patients who have come in here and their last words before we put a breathing tube in are they didn't realize it was as bad as it was. They thought they were doing what they could do to protect themselves. We've had several people come in here and be very sick that all they did was want to see their grandparents. I'm a grandparent. I would like to see my grandchildren. This is larger than that. By wearing a mask, you're protecting them as well as yourself. Please, if you do nothing else, please start wearing masks. Thank you.
This has been a really crazy time to be a nurse, especially an ICU nurse. In the beginning, in the spring, we had tons of support from the communities. We had the Blue Army, #Blue Army. We had people, putting blue hearts in their windows and blue porch lights on. I still have mine on. And then, over the summer kind of slowed, and now we're at the part where we've never been busier. We've literally never been busier, and I think for the most part the community has still been supportive, but I feel like we're kind of falling off a little bit with our support, and I think we really need the support. It's hard walking into these shifts every day or into the hospital every day, seeing some of these people just not progress, seeing multiple deaths, multiple days in a row. It's really hard to try to stay positive when the community itself isn't really got your back. There is some people who have been really resistant to the whole COVID world. They don't believe it exists. They don't see what we see. There's nothing political about these people dying.